Hello, Dave and Matthew,
Hello.
Hello.
all the way from across the pond.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of midday here. I know you've had to get up really early.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I was hoping to sleep in earlier, but alas, 5:30 still is the time I wake up.
yeah.
It comes to you with age. Dave hasn't
Yeah.
quite got there yet, but he will soon know 5:30.
Well, I know 5:30, and this might be inappropriate for your podcast because I have to get up and pop to the loo.
Ah,
But then but then I go back to bed and fall asleep again. So I'm aware of that level of old manisms. So the not being able to get through a night without getting up. Yeah. Anyway, great start to the podcast.
exactly.
Thanks for having us on, Jeff. I'm sure you might want us to leave now, possibly quite quickly. But yes,
So you guys have something going on, I hear.
Yeah.
we do.
We're in the middle of a Kickstarter, which I think it's fair to say today in particular, you catch us in a really quite light-headed mood because frankly, I think in our wildest expectations, we thought we might get £25,000 on this Kickstarter. And we
What
got that
wildest?
last night, and we've
Yeah.
still got 12 days to run. So
You guys look at Kick Track?
we do look at Kick Track.
So
Yes,
I looked at
I
Kick
do.
Track, and you just got a 3,000, oh, it was 3,000 pound influx as of yesterday.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yes. That's
That was
what's put
our
us in this light-headed mood.
yeah, that was
We
our
can tell you
best.
why that is, I think.
Yeah, that was our best day, with the
Rush,
exception of the very first day.
it wasn't
That was
Russian bots.
It was not Russian bots.
our-
I tell you what I think, and I think since your audience is mostly gaming
Yeah.
professionals, what we have learned is virtual tabletops, mate. Virtual tabletops are where it's at.
They're popular. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was
We
so that was our stretch goal. So we yesterday morning our time we hit our 22,000 stretch goal, and the next stretch goal was a £3,000 one for 25k, which was Foundry virtual tabletop with
Oh,
a system and a module. And the module for the core book will be free to all of our backers on the campaign. And off went the pledges. It was like, start your
yeah.
motors, away you go. It was very, very surprising and
And it
very,
wasn't
very
people increase. Well, I mean, there were some people increasing their pledge, but it was mostly new backers putting new pledges in. So it
we
struck
had a
me there
lot.
were a
Yeah.
whole bunch of people kind of saying, "Oh, I quite like the look of that game, but if I can't play it online, I'm not interested." And then
wow.
Mm,
bam, uh,
yeah.
another day two,
So that I got
effectively.
goosebumps. It makes me very nervous what you guys just said. When you said you were offering dice on your podcast, I was wanting to scream, "Don't do it! Don't do it!" so,
Ah,
so now you're doing VTT for
Yeah,
Foundry.
yeah.
yeah,
So we're very lucky because we know very well Paul Watson, who is the guy who's done all the Foundry stuff for Free League for Alien, and a lot of stuff for Simba Room. So
Okay.
so we were able to chat to him and get lots of advice from him, and he's going to do it for us.
Okay.
So we are as well placed to do that as anyone can be, I think, who,
yeah.
like Matthew and I, don't really use VTTs ourselves and wouldn't know where to start coding one.
No.
It's
But
it's the long-term support that worries me, but you guys
mm,
might have a handle on it because it's like what happens when they change versions and the old version breaks
Yeah, we
yeah,
and they
talked
get
a
yeah.
bit about that, and I'm not sure we finally signed a deal with Paul, but Paul is willing to support it at least a bit. At least, um, I mean, I honestly don't know how long these games stay in in the
yeah,
play space
yeah.
nowadays.
Mm,
So yeah, I think we can commit to supporting it for a while because, of course,
yeah,
it's free to backers now, but when they've all been rewarded, then the system will still be free, but the module that contains all the meat, as it were, of the core book will be a paid item, a bit like
yeah.
you might
Yeah.
download a PDF. So we should see enough going in there to keep Paul in biscuits or whatever drives his coding. Uh,
Yes,
Yeah,
we
you
are.
want to keep
We
Paul.
we do pay in biscuits. We don't pay in money. We pay in biscuits. So yeah,
And I got to ask you though, Jeff, why did you suck your teeth at dice?
Well, because it is an item that you have a lot less control over. So you're going to have to get it manufactured, and things can go wrong. And if you go to
Yeah.
China, then you're dealing with supply chain issues. That's
Yeah. We're not
So
going to China for anything, I'm pleased to say.
we've gone for an
And our
English
ambition
manufacturer.
the
I
ambition
have
was
actually
always
got to
quite
chase them.
small. So yeah.
Yeah.
But the ambition was always quite small. We originally only had dice trays and the trouble dice. So
yeah,
it's just a pack of 5 dice, which are lovely little trouble dice with a trouble icon on them. So we tried to rein in our enthusiasm. Um, and we had a little kind of flurry about putting a GM screen in at the start, and we then wisely decided not to. But then luckily we did well enough so we could put that in as a stretch goal, and then
yeah,
that got blown out of the water as
yeah.
well, which is fabulous. So we're trying to be careful, especially seeing it's our first Kickstarter, and we've been very lucky to get loads of advice from a bunch of people, including you. I remember chatting to you about it. And I think hopefully we are dodging most of the schoolboy pitfalls.
Okay.
I think he says,
Well, we'll wait. Yeah, let's wait until we deliver in May. And if
we'll
we
find
delivered
out,
in
yeah.
May and everything's gone smoothly,
Yeah.
then we dodge the pitfalls.
Yeah.
Because
But again, I think we feel quite well prepared thanks to the advice and guidance we've been given by lots of people who know a lot more about Kickstarter than we do.
because there's really two types. I'm assuming of dice. The one is that there's the kind that you're actually having to get a die made and injection mold, and that's very expensive. And there's the other, I believe, where you can probably have somebody screen print or do some sort of printing over a flat surface.
Nice. Yeah, or indeed etch into a flat surface. We've got UK-based suppliers, one of each. One of them molds them whole, and it's quite a reasonable mold price, given that it's only one dice mold we're creating for this. 5 trouble dice, but they're all the same, so
Yeah.
just one dice mold. That's going to cost us. I don't know whether this is confidential information, but I think it's going to cost us about £800, and then the manufacturing can start.
That's not terrible.
Which isn't terrible, no. And so that's one I slightly favour, because we might be able to make them look a little bit more, it's pips on the other side, but we might make them look slightly more oldie-timey pips than and straighter edges, like they might have been carved bone dice or something like that. We might be able to do that. Or, as a backup, I've also been talking with another company that does that thing where either the 1 or the 6 side is blank when they get them in, probably from China, I expect, and then they engrave or screen print on whichever side you want. So we've got quotes for both of those. I don't know yet which one. I really ought to get my arse in gear, and
I think we need to have a sit down and talk about it based on how well we do at the end of the campaign and what our finances look like.
Yeah. I had a guy I know has a laser printer. I gave him a bag of blank dice to see if he could burn images on there, and it just melted the dice. So
oh, no. Get these lovely bag of
Yeah, I thought about stickers, using the Cricut, but I thought I don't know that I can consistently place. That's the thing, is you can try to do it yourself, but can you consistently place things centered every time
on hundreds of dice?
Yes. Because that's the nice thing about, I think the special dice, a lot of people, do not like having special dice, but it allows mechanics makes it, you have more flexibility with mechanics, which is nice. It's just the hard part is just the, coming up with the dice.
And to be honest, people don't need these dice. It has to be said. Any set of 5 distinctively coloured dice that you've got in your collection, let's face it, most role players have some dice in a collection.
Got enough dice for that, then you don't really deserve to call yourself a real role player. I mean, come on. Everyone has got enough dice to drown themselves in, surely.
And all we're saying is that 1s on this trouble dice mean trouble. And all we're doing is putting a little buffalo skull on the one side, which, kind of conveniently means trouble.
Yes.
especially for the poor buffalo, but also
Yeah.
looks a bit like a T because of the antlers and the long
And the
skull.
horns, yeah.
So antlers, yeah, horns, not antlers.
Horns, yeah.
So we, that's just quite a playful motif. But I'm just right now seeing how many of those packs we've sold, and I'll be able to tell you very shortly.
I
Yeah,
can't.
so
Oh, go ahead.
166 packs of 5 dice we've sold. So I think
Okay.
Well, how many backers at the physical level?
at that physical level at the moment,
There's 200 and something at the 240 at the for the standard book, and then we've got 100 for the fancy
I don't know where
book.
you're getting your numbers from. I'm looking at 177 standard books and 134 deluxe.
Oh,
Sorry,
right.
277 standard books and
about
134
50%
deluxe.
of the people in the physical books are buying the dice or are getting the add-ons for the dice.
Yeah, yeah. And they're of course only available to
Yeah.
physical backers. So the PDF only
Yeah,
version.
The difference is you're looking at the stats on the back end. I'm looking at the
The actual pledges.
and
Yeah.
hadn't added the 30 backers we've got who are getting both. So
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is obviously you've had your first successful or your first Kickstarter, you knocked it out of the park. So I'm not sure that any of my warnings or concerns are.
Well, we've got to
No, but
deliver
no.
it yet, mate. So we haven't finished yet.
Yeah.
This is just the start. This is the fun bit, isn't it? So
Yeah.
And they were useful. I think if we'd been too ambitious at the beginning, a whole bunch of people might have looked at,
Yeah.
what we were trying to do at the beginning and gone, two new boys aren't going to make that, and not backed. So that, we kept our ambitions modest at the beginning because of advice from people like you and Shep and other people that have actually run Kickstarters, and that's paid dividends, I think.
And great advice it was. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, I mean, you have two things going on. On one hand, do the dice sell you more pledges? Yes or no. But the other thing is, and then do the dice pay for themselves, yes or no? But then the third thing is, it's just kind of cool if you're having a product like this to have the dice for it. I mean, there's a certain point where you look at, you're like, I don't want to lose money on this, but it is very nice having your own set of dice for your game.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely eye candy for the Kickstarter page as well, for sure. Certainly, if I'm looking at something, I like to see a nice little picture of the peripherals that are coming with the game, and I'll usually buy the dice. I mean, I backed Borg, which was a game done by Chris Lowry of I can't remember the name of his thing now. Anyway,
It's gone out of my head. Apocalypse something
like that. Yeah.
Cataclysm.
Anyway, it's a game I'm never going to play, but I bought it because you get a fancy little set of D4s. No, actually, I hate D4s. I got them, and I thought, why the hell did I bother getting these? But it was the dice that helped me over the line to back that game.
I think that's the joke, though, isn't it? That Borg is a version of Morkborg, but with the worst dice imaginable.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I think if you get the ones that are kind of like extended rectangle or rectangular formed, those aren't too bad. They're kind of fun because they actually roll.
Yeah.
But I agree. The 4s, they are terrible. Because it seems like no matter how you throw it, they wind up the same. It's just like out of your hand. It's just like,
and they are just home defense devices.
Yeah.
You got enough of them, just chuck them on the floor, and anyone trying to break in at the night is gonna cause them a problem.
Yeah. So and I've also looked at your guys's you've hit the bathtub part, but you're doing really good. You have not had any negative days. So I don't think you guys are going to have any negative days. Maybe you will.
Yeah, we've had a day relatively recently where I think we got 2 backers and we lost 1, so that's the closest we had to a negative.
Our worst day was actually something like 240 quid of pledges, because I've been tracking them. So but we have had days where we've lost a bit at the beginning, and we've then recovered it. But I don't really know, because nobody who we spoke to gave us that level of insight into how much money they would be hoping to be getting as pledges during the doldrum period of the campaign. But we've say 250 is the worst. We've had a few days at 350, but other than that, it's been floating at the 400, 500, 600 mark ish.
Yeah. So generally what happens is either you have your audience and the large majority like backs it up front.
Yep.
And then you don't get any more people trickling in, and then the people who do it the last back end will do it. Or I think what you're getting is you're getting a continuous stream of people coming to your Kickstarter and backing
Yeah.
it, which is big. Because I would assume also the what is it, not watchers, is it watchers? For your conversion, that number should be going up as you go. Followers, the followers, yeah.
The followers, yeah.
Yeah, our followers number keeps going up. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good sign.
Which, when we started, our follower to backer conversion rate was really good, to the high 20s. And then our follower numbers just have gone up and our percentage conversion has gone down.
It's good because you're going to harvest those people at the end.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, if a lot of those followers then back us right at the end, then that'll be cool.
Yeah, so I would think you would still see, because I know you guys had a really good conversion rate earlier on. So I would imagine, it's your first Kickstarter. It's hard to say, but I mean, I would imagine that you might see that similar conversion percentage at the end.
Yeah. So at the moment, right now, we've got 1,021 followers, and 221 of those have converted. So we're looking at a 20% conversion rate, which is what everybody said.
Yeah. And it should, at the end, I call it the March of the Modrons. The last 48 hours, you all of a sudden just see a stream of people come in.
Yeah.
And then your conversion, that's where your conversion will, because you will not be getting any more new people at that point. And all those people will then, who are following, will back, and you'll see, that's where you see the uptick in your conversion rate.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I mean, if somebody said to us at the start, here you go, we'll give you, you'll get 15 grand or 16 grand, I'd have bitten their hand off at that point, and been delighted with it. So their performance has outstripped our wildest dreams, really. I mean,
yes, I think
25
at that
grand
point where we hit 25, I was no way, that was absolutely the maddest number that I thought we could get.
Yeah, it's superb. We've been very lucky. Really
because I would imagine, I don't know your particular numbers, but I would imagine that 10,000 pounds is probably squeaking by. That is probably your
you may not know, but actually you've hit the button.
Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So we were advised, we were originally looking at 10,000 as our target. We were advised to try and bring that down if we could. So we did, but then we carried a little bit of risk that if we only just crept over 8,000, we would have to put up a bit more money ourselves to get the book out in the way we wanted it.
Right.
10 grand gave us the money to create the book with the quality and the style that we want, which is great. So as soon as we hit that, we were confident that the book would get out there and it would be the book that we would want, and people would get it in their hands and go, yes, this feels like a quality product.
But even so, a bunch of the money in that is tied up in stock then, because that wasn't going to be very much. So I think we would still have felt quite poor. Dave and I have obviously loaned the company money to, get artwork on the way and sensitivity reading and stuff like that. So there's money we've invested that we're hoping to get out of this Kickstarter. Well, that we weren't necessarily hoping to get out. We both of us, unluckily, had parents who had died and left us a bit of money in the last couple of years, and we had said we will put some of that money, each of us, towards
into this
thing. But we've been keeping track of it as well, particularly since we became directors of a company to run the Kickstarter. I've been saying this is a director's loan so that we can get that out tax-free if we have enough money in there. But it looks like
making profit.
We might actually now. So that would be really cool. And still look forward to do all the stuff we wanted to do.
And that's what's hard, because you were smart that you set it at a level that you're funding that you needed. But there's always that temptation because it's harder to reach sometimes that number. Sometimes if you do a lower number, it feels like you can build momentum because it's already funded. Once it's already funded, people feel more confident. But I think definitely it's going to show you're wise to say, if this isn't going to make it, we need to regroup and refigure this out and try again later.
But in fact, we did have and I think somebody who's been through that experience had said, do it for 6,000. 6,000 is the magic number. 6,000 you'll achieve. But Dave and I had a bit of an argument about it, actually, though, because if we'd only achieved 6,000, then the printing that we wanted to do for this book wouldn't have been possible. We could have still printed it, but in a far cheaper process that.
Yeah. So what you're wanting to do is offset printing, I'm assuming from Lithuania?
Yeah. Offset printing. I want, proper round spine and all that sort of stuff. And we could have done it in, effectively print on demand format with a square spine, but that offends me.
Almost as much as I do.
Dave knows that a lot of things about typography and bookbinding and stuff actually offend me more than they should offend any sane person.
Yes,
but
I will point true.
To a number of other people who are trained in these arts that we do get offended by that. And it wasn't so much on the basic version. I could have lived with a basic version like that. But if we were going to be offering a deluxe version, I wanted that deluxe version to be something more than simply a different cover on the same cheaply produced book. So we compromised. Yeah. We took that extra risk and said, we'll do it at 8,000. And if we'd only just scraped over 8,000, Dave and I would have taken a hit on that, but we would have got something close to the book we wanted.
Yeah.
But luckily, the momentum kicked in early on. And I think going back to day one, Dave, you would agree that we were, both of us, pleasantly surprised by how quickly we hit that £8,000 target.
Well, it was bonkers, frankly. I mean, on the first day, we've got a really nice little support base. Our podcast and the Patreon that came from that has got a lovely community, and we've had so much support from all those people. So we knew there was a lot of people there who were going to back us the minute we opened up. For the life of me, I didn't expect that was going to amount to more than, say, 3,000 or 4,000 on the first day. For us then to be racing to our target in 5 hours was very much like an out-of-body experience, and very much sort of like, who, me? Is this happening to us? It can't be.
Yeah.
And that was fabulous. I mean, that first 5 hours, and we blew through the target. It was just okay. That's got to be good.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, it's like, because I've been thinking about publishing for a system in between like 2D20 or even your Zero Engine, and I mean there are some, but there's not a lot of third-party publishers in that area. Well, I have a publisher, I mean people doing Kickstarters, but and then so there's not a lot of like data to go off, and then you're also doing a Western, which is kind of a really not a very popular genre overall. So there's a bit of risk.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I do think Dave is probably going to hate me for saying this. I always thought there was demand in Europe for a Western, but I wasn't convinced there was demand in the US for a Western, because you guys are so much closer to that history.
Yes.
And and in fact, even among our patrons, actually, there's one patron whose opinion we respect very much, who said, I'm sorry, but I just wouldn't get this.
And he's an American, yeah.
It's too painful.
So I didn't disagree with that. But I think I was conscious that there is also, whilst you've got that group in the US for whom the history is too close, you've also got, I think, a big community in the US who love that old Wild West feel. So I always thought we would get a good customer response in the US, even accepting Matthew's comments about the fact that for some people it wasn't going to be for them.
I think for me, I think the things that we're familiar with just become mundane. So
that's a good point.
And so, I mean, for me, I mean, there's no like feeling of, I don't say what's I'm looking for. I don't have any feelings like emotionally about the situation. I mean, but I don't watch a lot of Westerns, and but I do find it kind of interesting. There's an earlier picture. I loved writings of G.K. Chesterton, and there's a photo of him and Bernard Shaw and H.G. Wells and some other guy. They were on some sort of royalty estate, and they were filming a Western. Like the guy got a camera and says, let's do a Western. And I just thought that's just very interesting that these intellectuals decided they wanted to do their own Western movie. And I just realized that, I think for us, we in the US romanticize the European history, where you're close to it. And it seems like the types of, like, with Warhammer and various other things, it's like you're very open-eyed about what medieval life was like. It wasn't this romanticized stuff. So I think there's kind of this, similar type thing going on.
That the arm's length kind of element to it. Yeah.
No, that could be true. That could be true. I'm just looking at the numbers so far, and 185 backers, which is by far the largest proportion, have actually come from the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, when I talk about the European market, that's a whole bunch of other countries. I'm not going to do the maths live.
That would be really scintillating. Yeah, so let's do stats on Jeff's podcast. That would be fun.
Yeah, probably Europe as a whole will beat the United States, but that is still, quite a strong number of backers from the US.
It's about a third of our backers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Italy is, imagine, pretty strong.
Yeah. Now, you see, I thought it would be, but currently not. I've just got 3 backers from Italy, and I thought we'd do really well there. We've got to take on another artist. We've realised, and we're just talking to an Italian artist actually who's quite keen to work with us on that. So that might change things if we can get him on board and announce him before the campaign ends.
Yeah.
But that's actually quite quiet. So obviously for a Zero Engine game, we're big fans of Free League. Free League have supported us through this. They've reposted our links and stuff like that. So Sweden's quite big,
which is cool.
And then we're looking at Canada. So we're looking at, just in order, as it were. We've got the US, Great Britain, Sweden, Canada, Germany, and Denmark are the big ones. France as well. France and Hungary and Austria, interestingly.
Cool.
Are you shipping to Australia?
Sorry, that may actually be Australia. That might be Australia.
Okay.
Because I'm only using the two-letter country code. It probably is Australia. Actually.
Was that deliberate, Jeff?
I didn't do it.
Okay.
I didn't touch it. My hands are not touching anything.
Did you do that, Matthew?
What's that?
We just had a graphic of like balloons floating past your screen.
Oh no, that's one of those Zoom things.
Right.
What did I say? So Zoom does do these things, or if I do this, maybe does that work? No, that's not working now.
No.
But sometimes it does those virtual things.
Okay.
Yeah.
You obviously said the magic word, but we now don't know what it was.
Australia. Obviously, that's the magic word.
Canada.
No.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting is, if I understand correctly, there are Westerns out there, but they tend to either be on the fantastic, right? More of the horror, or I noticed there's another Western Kickstarter going on the same time as yours by some guy who does miniatures.
The wild imagined West.
And I looked at the graphics, and it's very much a comic booky, over the top, but that's not the aesthetic that you're going for.
Definitely not.
Absolutely not. No, we're going for the gritty recreation of the West in the 1870s, trying to make the game feel a bit like you might actually be there, try and help you as a player experience what, at least some kind of reflection of what the real people at the time might have gone through, and the opportunities that they had and the hardships they had to suffer.
And it makes me think, because my dad would read like Louis L'Amour novels or Zane Grey, and it's just it's kind of interesting that I think that has not really been approached. I don't know that, because my earliest recollection of a Western game was Boot Hill, which was really just a gunfight simulator.
Yeah. Yeah, so you got Boot Hill. We also played a little bit of Aces and Eights, which I think as a game isn't a weird game, although the guy who ran it for us did put in werewolves.
Well, it has the option to be a weird game, and it does have an alternate history, actually. If you
Does it? Okay.
Yeah, so it has a slightly different ending to the Civil War and things like that.
Okay.
So
yeah, but that wasn't something that we wanted to emulate in Tales of the Old West. I mean, that said, we are, we totally recognize the mythology of the West and things like, the gunfight at dawn and the end of a spaghetti western with Lee Van Cleef and Clint Eastwood staring each other down. This is a really important element of the Wild West mythology, and people love it. So we have included. We love it, absolutely, yeah. So we have included rules that allow you to have that duel at dawn if you want to. In the real history, you can count the number of occasions where that kind of thing actually happened on the fingers of one hand, pretty much, because it was really rare. What would normally happen is two guys would have an argument in a saloon, and rather than go out and settle it in a duel, one of them would run off home, grab their shotgun, and shoot the other guy through the back, through the window of the saloon, which would be a lot more common. But we wanted to create rules that would allow you to do that, and we really pleased with those rules. I think they create a lovely narrative moment in the game. It's not just about how good you are at shooting. You have to be able to stare the other guy down and make him flinch a little bit with your presence and your intimidation. You have to be quick with your hand to get the gun out, to draw the gun quickly. And then it's only then that your ability with the gun to shoot them comes into play. So it's, to be a really good gunfighter, it's more than just being able to shoot well. You've got to do more stuff to be a really good gunfighter in the game.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, getting hurt back then was a big ordeal without the modern medicine. So you wanted to stack as much advantage as you would have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Getting hurt is bad in this game, and it's quite dangerous. You can get one-shotted. It's entirely possible to get killed with one shot or one blow from a knife or something.
For us, at the very beginning, it was important to be a really quick character generation game, so that if you're shot, you can make a new character quite quickly.
Yeah, not that we, I think this isn't paranoia. You're not losing a character every 10 minutes. But what it does do is it drives the players to think a little bit about how they react to certain situations. Drawing your gun may well not be the best way of dealing with that situation because it runs the risk of getting you killed. And I think that's great. You make the players think about how they're going to react, and maybe they'll try and find a way without violence to deal with the problem.
So what sort of, I always call it stories, even though it's not quite appropriate. So what kind of stories are you hoping would come through the mechanics and the types of play that you see this game producing?
I think to start with, because gunplay is so dangerous and so deadly, what we're hoping for, and in fact, we made gunplay dangerous and deadly because of this, is we're hoping that it's going to be a game more about social interaction, about trying to do anything before pulling the gun from your holster and starting a gunfight, because that might be the last thing you ever do. So it's interesting. In our playtest campaigns, I think, Dave, you would agree the two groups have played very differently. But
yes, yeah.
But again, one of the important mechanics, in fact, we haven't mentioned it yet. I can't believe we've gone half an hour into this or more, and we haven't mentioned Deadwood yet. So Deadwood is, if you like, our core inspiration. It wasn't initially, but within about a day of development, we realized that's what we both wanted to do. So that idea of a town developing and a community developing and people making alliances within that community, and those alliances may be shifting pragmatically and sometimes, politically. We want, Dave and I, we've been playing role-playing games since our school days, and I would argue that we have, and everybody around that, our local table when we were playing in those days, we've avoided bashing through a dungeon to get to the big monster and then killing the big monster, and new monsters being the interesting thing, we have always tended towards interweaving of social conflict and different factions being the thing. So we've played lots of very human-centric games like Traveller, where the aliens can kind of be unknowable and we don't interact with them very much, as opposed to monster bashing. So it's always been about problem solving with human relationships, and I think that comes out in this game quite a lot. Yeah, I'll shut up and let you talk now, Dave, because I think I might have run out of steam.
Yeah, so again, as Matthew alluded to there, social conflict is a thing that we've focused on quite a bit in the rules. So you can try and intimidate or kind of or browbeat your opponent. You can try and persuade them, but in that engagement, you will roll an opposed roll against them, and if you win, they will then suffer damage to their stats that relate to the social and the mental side. So you've got cunning and docility. Docility is basically your ability to learn and retain information. Cunning is your natural innate ability to deal with the world and understand how the world works. But if you lose in that kind of social conflict, you'll take damage to one of those. Now, damage to your cunning is called vexes, so you start to get more angry. Damage to your docility is called doubts, so you start to doubt yourself and lose your strength of the argument. But at any point in that social conflict, you can say, okay, you win, you do what you want, you win the argument. But if you want to push it all the way, you can continue that conflict until you run out of points, or they run out of points on their cunning or their docility. At that point, you're broken, so you've lost the argument, you're out of the scene. And then, if you get broken on your cunning, that's your vexes, you might get angry and turn the table over, or smash a window, or do something like that.
Or pull your gun, even. But you're broken.
Yeah.
So
you're broken, so you're out.
You
of
may
the
get one attack, but you're not going to get any more because you're already broken.
You're basically out of the scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we've tried to make that as involved and interesting as combat, rather than just saying, oh, you want to persuade them, make a persuade roll, you succeed, he does what you want. So we're trying to make it more.
But you could do what was common, I guess, with some people, is you could drive an argument, break somebody so that they do pull the gun.
Yeah.
And then shoot them. Yeah. Exactly.
So one of self-defense. One of my favorite modern day Westerns is Justified, the show with Timothy Olyphant in it. Timothy Olyphant features in a lot of our Westerns, actually, thinking about this. But in that, he's doing that all the time. He's talking people into pulling the gun first so that he can shoot them, which is where the bloody title of the TV show comes from. It's always a justified killing when he's done it.
Yeah. We even had that in one of the play tests that I run. We had exactly that. We had the player characters were trying to intervene in a situation where a bunch of NPCs, bad guys, were trying to incite another NPC that they needed to protect to get so angry that he would then draw his gun and they would just gun him down. So yeah, it's definitely very much a, the self-defense is was well used in the history of the Wild West, and was successful on a great number of occasions, which is why I guess it gets used. It was used so much.
And so
build that into the mechanics. Sorry, no, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, no, I was going to ask about, because you talk about with the push mechanic. I think what you talk about as hope is a key factor, right, into
faith.
The mechanics.
Faith is the
faith. That's right, not hope, but faith.
Yeah.
And that could be religious faith, or it could be faith in your, self-belief, as it were. It could be faith in your gun, in your horse, whatever it is. We ask you to put it into words in some way what your faith is, as well as give you a number of points for it. But your faith can be whatever you as a player choose.
Yeah.
And that just helps us build the adventures around, what you believe. It doesn't really have a mechanical effect, that faith, but it helps you earn experience points as well. If you do something that's in line with whatever your faith is, then you'll get an extra experience point at the end of the adventure. But you get, to begin with, 4 faith points that you can spend to push your rolls. We've already mentioned that when you push your rolls, there are trouble dice, and you're always rolling 5 trouble dice, or if you don't have 5 dice in your roll, then whatever number of trouble dice you're rolling, whatever number of dice you're rolling, are all trouble dice. Get a 6 on any of those, you succeed. Get a 1 on a pushed roll, then trouble can happen. But you can spend extra faith points either to buy off the 1 on a roll before you push, or to buy off ones that you get on the roll after you've pushed. So pushing can, it costs at least 1 point of faith, but it can cost as many points of faith as you've got if you've rolled badly, if you don't want to suffer the consequences of the trouble. So it's slightly variable. You're never quite sure whether your faith will be shaken or not, but it's always in your control as a player. And one of the important things, again, in fact, it's what I was going to talk about when I so rudely interrupted you, Jeff, is that you can earn faith by doing some of the things that we see in Western movies. And what really drove it home is when we, in playtesting, we realized, what we're doing very often before a fight is we go to church, we have a meal with our family, we go and groom our horse, we go off and ride into the countryside and be a bit alone for, a quarter day or whatever. And these are all things that earn you a point of faith, because we know we're going to be spending those points of faith if we're going to survive this gunfight we're going to head into. But it feels so natural. And in fact, one of the things I think we now recommend in the book is you should be doing these at the beginning of your adventure. Don't wait until the gunfight's looming around the next corner, because you may only get a chance to earn 1 point of faith. But if you start your adventure by doing some of those things, then that's a great lead in for the, you get a faith point straight away just by doing something that you see typically in a Western film. But that could also be a way that when you're out riding in the countryside, you witness something that triggers the tale, or somebody comes to you while you're having a meal and gives you, some letter that's going to be a mission for the tale or something like that. So it's a tool for the GM as well, then when their players are doing these things, to get everybody into the scene and start building the story up in the adventure itself.
And that's something that we're really keen on in this game as well, is about making the rules work to help the GM create stories. So Matthew's already mentioned faith. So, a character will have their faith, and that is sort of the bedrock of their character. That is what drives them. That's partly their personality. That's what's important to them. But they'll also have a big dream that they will articulate as well in a short statement. And that can be something really grand. It could be, I want to be the greatest horse rancher in all New Mexico. Or it could be something quite small and personal, like I want to earn enough never to have to steal again. So that's entirely up to the player. But again, that gives the GM immediately something that they can hang stories off, to create stories that are actually directly relevant and really important to the player characters, and are focused on what the players want to be trying to deal with. We also have things like we have a mechanic called the compadre. Now, the compadre is a special non-player character, and you can often earn them during character generation, or you might gain them through play. And they are a character that you as the player will control on the whole. There's somebody who's loyal to you. There's something, an old friend. There might be a family member, but you control them. You can set them off to do like little mini missions. For example, my character has got an old friend called Grandpa Willie, who is his compadre, and I sent him off to go and negotiate with some Native Americans who I was trying to get some horses off, and I hadn't spoken to them for a while, so I sent him to keep the relationship warm. So they can do things like that, or they can they can look after the farm whilst you go off adventuring. But also
they might have skills that you're short of as well if you're a relatively small group and you haven't got all your skills covered.
The GM can control them too. So if you treat them badly, those compadres can do stuff. They might not be as loyal as you think, and that in itself can kick off stories. But also we have our campaign play, and the campaign play manages time through what we call the turn of the seasons. And so every 3 months in game time, you'll have a turn of the seasons, and that involves a few little rolls to see how well your town is developing, to see what your personal fortunes are like and what the town fortunes are like, to see how well your business is doing if you own one. And this is all done in a few dice rolls. But all of that gives other prompts for the GM. So the town fortune roll will result in something that's going to happen in and around the town. It might be that vermin are destroying all the town's crops. It might be that somebody important is coming to town. But all of these things are there for the GM to then think, okay, I can roll that into a scenario in the next season. So that's another idea for them. Your personal fortune rolls also have the same thing. So, for example, you can have a compadre. Something bad happens to your compadre. So to finish the story about Grandpa Willie, I'd sent him off to do his job. He then came back, all fine. We had a turn of the season. I rolled for my fortune and it came up with problem with your compadre. So that became a scenario where it turns out that Grandpa Willie got himself into some trouble in one of the towns on his way back. So the first I knew about it was when a couple of marshals turned up at the farm to arrest him. Now I knew that he was going to be innocent, so that then prompted a couple of sessions where we went off to town, we got Grandpa Willie hidden away, we went to this town to work out what the real crime was and exonerate Grandpa Willie. And that all came from, my character's desire to protect his friend, from the dice roll that we got in the campaign, and it created a two-part scenario that was great fun, and the GM didn't really have to think very much about. So there's quite a lot of that baked into the mechanics of the game to try and help the GM create stories that really matter to the players.
Yeah, and I think that's can be important for the GM to be surprised, because that can be fun rather than just everything just being laid out in a linear structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, that's the other thing that Trouble does as well, in that something could happen there that is very surprising. I think surprised the GM. And again, this is in one of the playtests that you were involved in, where for reasons that we won't go into, they were disinterring a grave and they were trying to do it secretly. They got discovered. The verger or whoever it was, they tried to put their hand around his mouth to keep him quiet, but they rolled really bad Trouble. And he fell into the grave and injured himself, and then they had to make a decision about whether they were going to look after him or maybe not. And I'll leave.
It turned into a Quentin Tarantino movie at that point.
Yeah, exactly. But that was unscripted. That was something that totally came out of the dice, not something that the GM had ever imagined they would be planning.
So in the end, that poor man didn't survive, and then after they dug the body up and checked what they were trying to check and found what they needed to find out, they buried the body, but reburied the poor verger in the same grave as the body they just dug up. So and then my character wasn't involved in any of that. I was a player for that one, and as we rode out of town, having dealt with the problem, which looked like a gunfight, but we managed to do it in a social conflict kind of way, I rode out of town. My character said, well, nice to go somewhere and not kill anybody for once. Without knowing that there was some poor verger dead in the graveyard. Yeah. It was, yeah. So I think there's quite a lot of unpredictability about some of these things. And the trouble tables give the GM an indication of the kind of thing that should be happening, but gives the GM plenty of scope to interpret that trouble to fit the moment that the trouble occurs. So it's not a prescriptive table, but it does give you some ideas, and it seems to work really well.
Well, it feels in some ways that you've taken some of the concepts of Coriolis and found areas where it was lacking, and found ways to kind of take that same type of thing about faith and such to work it more into mechanics and make it something that has teeth, and rather than
Coriolis was the first game of Free League that I discovered, and it's kind of the reason that Dave and I do a podcast together. Not the first game that Dave, you'd done it before with
Mutant Year
Zero with a group that I wasn't involved in. But yeah, so there are definitely things that we thought could be improved in Coriolis. Social conflict being part of that. We feel I love Coriolis deeply, but its social conflict is one of the worst written in all the Year Zero games. and things from Forbidden Lands. It was kind of Forbidden Lands that said, that inspired us to actually do this Western. But again, things from Forbidden Lands we feel we've improved on here, but they're great in Forbidden Lands. And yeah, so a whole bunch, and we've played a whole bunch of year zero engine games. So probably that people might think, oh, there's a little bit of that in there. I guess trouble dice are a bit like stress dice in Alien after all.
Yeah.
Although not
very,
quite
though.
so
Not very.
internalized.
No, not
And not
very.
very. And you don't earn
No.
you don't earn extra trouble dice. You just have those 5 all the way
There is,
through.
yeah, there is a way of making a trouble worse through trouble, actually, which then means you suffer trouble on a 1 or a 2 rather than just a 1. But you don't gain any more trouble dice during the game. No, but one of the things that Coriolis, I think, was a great example for us was turning a mechanic and making it a role-playing element of the game. So in Coriolis, you have prayer. When you push the dice roll, you pray to the icons. They obviously exist because sometimes good things happen because they obviously listen to you. But before you go into a situation, it makes absolute sense to go to the chapel and pray to the icons before you get involved in trouble. Now, in the game, in Coriolis, you can pray to a particular icon and then gain a bonus to certain skills, depending on the icon you pray to later on. So there is a mechanical benefit to it. But it really encourages players to get into that religious side of the game and then go and pray and all of that kind of stuff. So with faith, that was something we wanted to emulate. And so the idea of, like Matthew was saying, spending some time to clean your gun, going for a ride in the wilderness with your horse, is all about adding a role-playing element that has a mechanical benefit to encourage players to get into that side of atmosphere building and sort of greater lore building around their character and about what their character does when they're not shooting bad guys.
Well, I think it's a theme that everybody can have their own hook into very easily. Where I think with Coriolis, it's like, well, what does this mean, or what does this look like? And maybe there are these gods, and maybe they're not. And it's that's where I think, even though you still don't define what faith is, it's still something that we all can very easily say,
Yeah, I've got 2 points. First of all, I will say, of course, the icons exist in Coriolis because when you pray to them, you get to re-roll your dice. So, what more proof do you need?
Exactly.
So get that out of the way. That's credit that to Tony, your brother, Dave, who pointed that out to us all. But yeah, one of the things about having these kind of Western tropes as ways of earning faith, it means that as a player, you can, if you're that lazy sort of player that just wants to do that, because says, right, okay, today I'm going to clean my gun and go for a ride in the wilderness. And if they don't put any more role playing into that, that's fine, because we can already see, we're all trained in all the films we've seen where somebody is cleaning their gun and going for a ride in the wilderness. We know what he's doing. So if he wants to treat it shorthand like that, that's fine. If he wants to start role playing it some more and he says, okay, I'm going to clear off the family table and lay out an oilcloth and start disassembling my gun, that's cool too. It means that, we're all speaking that shared language, however you like to role play, whether you like to do it just purely mechanically and say, can I have my extra point, please? That's fine, really. But if you want to, again, and also you've got the opportunity that after you've laid out your cloth, the GM says, somebody comes in at your door and says, the next scene starts here, sort of thing.
Yeah, whilst your gun is in pieces on the table in front of you.
Yeah. So I think, and the point I want to make is because we're using Western tropes, I think that it makes role playing easier there.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the failing, because I was looking at like with it's hard because if you do the things that we'll call, I won't say alien, as far as, just different from our experiences, it becomes harder to really do. And I think something like RuneQuest does a pretty good job of kind of conveying the world and what it means. But it's also, but the problem with that is you got to, read so much to even get your brain around it. That, you know what I mean? It's such a massive thing. So, it's how do you get that concise, but yet also in a way that's meaningful? It's hard.
Absolutely. I think we did a podcast years ago during lockdown about how do you introduce these really complex worlds to people, and RuneQuest obviously has got 50 years now of people playing it and people building on the knowledge. So that looks really daunting. But I think even Coriolis, people have looked at that 300 odd page rulebook and gone, how do I process all this lore before I can start enjoying the game?
Yeah.
And a point that, funnily enough, just when we wrote Hope's Last Day, which is the adventure in the Alien core book, and we had initially had a lot of pushback from the guys at Free League about setting it in Hadley's Hope, the scene from Aliens, because they, their deal with Fox had said, we're going to start everything about 3 years after Aliens. So that's where we really want to limit your work, they said to me and Dave. And we said, but setting it in Hadley's Hope gives people the shorthand. They immediately know where they are in the world and what's the world like. And by all means, this is only a starter session. It's only 5,000 words you've asked us to write. But let's use that shorthand so we're not having to describe a whole new colony or even have a line like you're in Bingley's Bottom and it's a bit like Hadley's Hope out of the alien.
Exactly.
Well, the thing is, the two words Hadley's Hope were worth 2,500 words of description and exposition because everyone just got it. So that really, really made a big difference. Yeah,
that's the beauty of you're doing something like a game in Star Wars. Everybody knows. People who've never played an RPG, everybody's seen Star Wars. You don't have to describe the Empire's bad and stormtroopers are not great people, and it's the Jedi, or it's that shorthand is really nice. And I think, but I think with Coriolis they could have provided more solidity and just provide some examples. But what is a normal this or that, but they got a second chance at that, don't they? With the
I think they do.
Yeah.
And I think this second version will focus a lot more on a far smaller universe. But what I loved about Coriolis and what inspired us to, as we say, start the podcast that really started the whole Effect brand was that every paragraph you wrote in Coriolis was a story hook. They'd mentioned something in passing that they hadn't even actually imagined. There were no rules for what I'm trying to think of an example. I can't think of an example, but they'd mention it. You could be a thingamy-bob that does this, and that's the only mention in the whole book about thingamy-bobs. But for me, that was going, oh right, I can have a guild of thingamy-bobs that do this thing, and that's why we started the podcast initially, so that we could unpack some of those things. And I'm quite proud of some of that work we did on that Third Horizon stuff, actually, Dave.
And we did a lot, and we kind of run out of things to talk about in the end, almost. But that was one of the things I loved about Coriolis, because no faction was painted as good or evil. They were all grey. They would say, it's normally like this, but then sometimes it's like this. So as a GM, you could just pick anywhere on that spectrum you like that appealed to you and make it your own. But I get that.
Although obviously the Zolossians are good and the Zenithians are space Nazis.
Well, the Zolossians are bad and the Zenithians are space Nazis.
The Zolossians are bloody Starfleet, mate.
No, they're not.
I'd make a very strong argument, and I think the end of the blooming camp. Oh, we haven't got to the end of the campaign yet. Okay. Spoilers.
So maybe you've got inside information that I don't have that makes you say that the Zolossians are good guys. But the way they're portrayed, up to, as far as I've seen it, they ain't the good guys at all.
But they are religious. I'll give you that.
They are the Inquisition. They will burn you as soon as look at you. Anyway, sorry.
Maybe it's their enemies that are writing the history books. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think we might be hitting close to a hard stop here.
Yeah. It's been a real pleasure. Is there anything we still want to say, Dave? Apart from, when's this podcast coming out?
I would say if I get my act together, it would be tonight.
Excellent. In which case, superb. On hearing this podcast, come to Kickstarter and tap in Tales of the Old West and back our great game, and you'll enjoy it as much as we've enjoyed playtesting it. Or check out our quick draw on Drive-Thru RPG, Tales of the Old West quick draw, or come to our website, www.effect Publishing, Effect with a K, and Effect Publishing, all one word, .com, and read about our lovely new game, and of course then go on to kickstart it. I think that's all we need to say, isn't it?
I think that's most of it. Obviously, if you want to have a listen to any actual plays, our actual play channel, Effect AP, again, Effect with a K, .org. Go and have a listen. There's a lot of Tales of the Old West content on there of us play testing. And but the key thing is come along to Kickstarter and join the posse.
Yeah, and if I'm a responsible person, and remember, I'll put all of that into the show notes.
Superb. Thank you.
Brilliant, mate.
Well, thanks for joining, and have to have you both on sometime again. And we can discuss some other topics that we weren't able to hit today.
Sure,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, brilliant. Cheers, Jeff. Thank you.